have actually 3 speakers today, 2 from one group, and we have John Hoeks and we have João Graça, and they are both from the arts faculty and from the communication part in that. And we have Susanne Täuber. You can also say Susanne Täuber, that's okay. And she's from the Faculty of Economics and Business, and she's a social psychologist. And the theme of today is, can we change the landscape by changing our diet? And that's a very hot topic. It's a very important topic to discuss in the sustainable landscape context. And João Graça and Professor John Hoeks, they will talk about that and their ideas of the role of communication in that development, that possible development or that emerging development or that should be development or whatever you could call it. And there can be nice discussion on that. And this sort of trend or motivation or task to go to a more plant-based diet, which is advocated a lot in terms of sustainability or many reasons for that. But it also may have this downside that the people on the good side say, well, you all have to be good. And this may have quite detrimental implications. And Susanne Täuber will talk about that, about, let's say, the downside of communicating from the moral perspective of being good and what it does to the other people who are left out and whether that works or not. So we're very happy with this discussion, which can bring a lot of interesting insights and perhaps some fireworks. And so we're happy to kick this off. So the order of the meeting is we first have Professor John Hoeks, and then we have João Graça, both for 10 minutes, and then Susanne Täuber, and then we have opening room for discussion. And if you have brief things or if you want to highlight a thing, you can always use the chat. And in this meeting, you can also make highlights, which is a special function of the Blue Jeans technology. So, to no avail, let's start out with Professor John Hoeks, a professor of communication and cognition at the Faculty of Arts. John, are you good to go?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Frans.
Very good.
I hope you can hear me.
I can hear you well.
Oh,
very
great.
Good.
So thanks for having us here on your program, so to say, so in this series of webinars. And I'm a professor of communication and cognition. I've studied cognitive psychology and a bit of AI in Amsterdam. And I went to do my PhD research in Nijmegen on processing. Sorry, oh, recording has started, okay. And then I ended up at the University of Groningen, and that was a very nice place for me to do my research. So I switched from doing neurolinguistics, psycholinguistics to communication science, and I haven't regretted a moment. So my research now.
AI is still an element in your research, or is it has that vanished?
Yes, as a matter of fact, it is, and it's becoming an element. As I'm thinking about so the need for coherence in our neural system, we want to have coherent beliefs, and if these beliefs are not coherent, you get a cognitive dissonance. Maybe you have heard the term. Yeah. So if beliefs are out of pace, if your behavior is different from your beliefs, then you get a nasty feeling, and you want to get rid of that feeling. And so, but about this matter of coherence, I think a very good avenue to research that is by looking at mental models and also how they are formalized in AI. Okay. So on my to-do list is getting in touch with a former professor at the University of Amsterdam who taught me artificial intelligence. So
yeah, okay. Very
yeah,
good.
it's very timely that you asked me that question. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well.
So, yeah.
Go ahead.
So I want to share my presentation with you. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, I see your presentation. Yes, very good.
Great. So it's about sustainability, and that's it's not a strange choice as we are at a Sustainable Landscapes seminar. So let's first talk about well, the general structure of this 10 minutes. So a brief moment to talk about sustainability, to discuss what it is, then about diets and landscapes, and then about the role of our research group, Communication and Cognition, named COCO. So if we talk about sustainability, we often mean different things. So different people mean different things. And that's why I want to highlight what we think sustainability is. And sustainability, in our view, is moving toward a system that is volhoubaar. And especially for speakers of Dutch and Afrikaans, that's a very sensible term to use for sustainability. So it's about creating a system that can go on and on until eternity. And that is sustainability in an economic sense, but also ecological and also ethical. And to get to such a system, it's necessary to minimize the negative impact we all have on either humans, animals, or the environment. So when I talk about humans, I mean the treatment of humans when they produce products for us, like smartphones, but also, say, wind turbines or solar panels. So how are humans treated? What are their working conditions? But I'm also talking about health. So what we are doing. So what is the effect of our buying behavior and other behavior on human health? So the second thing is animals, and animals are often left out of definitions of sustainability. But I think they need to be in there. And that's because everything we do may have an impact on animals, how they are treated, and especially about their suffering. And the animals' ability to suffer is what makes it very urgent to do something about it. So that's an ethical requirement of sustainable systems. So a sustainable system cannot be sustainable, volhoubaar, if animals or humans continue to suffer. So thirdly, environment. Environment is, of course, only relevant, you can say, if it pertains to humans or animals. So when I talk about environment, I mean so especially climate change issues. So how will humans and animals fare when the Earth overheats? And also, what will be the effect of the migration of countless climate refugees? But in addition, there is the question of, will there be enough resources for the generations to come? So for the humans and animals that are not yet there. But it's also about not only climate change, but also other things that pertain to the environment, like the degradation of nature, like deforestation, like ocean dead zones and pollution, and what has become a very recent and also very urgent problem, the loss of biodiversity. So what we would like to argue is that we need to take an inclusive perspective on sustainability. So not only focus on one of these or two of these, but on all three of them. And that is because it doesn't make any sense to do things for the environment that are hurtful for animals or for humans, or unhealthy, or that result in poor working conditions for people. Right? So that is why we argue for an inclusive perspective. Well, what can be a very important element in the transition towards such a sustainable system, we think, is the shift towards a plant-based lifestyle. And This shift will have serious ramifications, and by that I mean seriously positive ramifications, and these also concern the landscape. So the number of advantages of transitioning to a plant-based lifestyle, this list is very long, and you may think, well, lists are pretty tedious and boring, but nevertheless, I think it's a good thing to go through this list and look at the positive consequences of changing our diet and lifestyle. So for humans, it's about human health. So it will moving towards a plant-based lifestyle will mean a reduction or maybe getting rid of zoonosis like COVID-19 completely. We will also end the antibiotics resistance that's becoming a big problem in our health system. And also, if we cut down on red meat and processed meat, that will mean that we are exposed less to carcinogenous elements in our food. And cholesterol, if we reduce cholesterol, that will also mean that we will become more healthy. Not only health, but also working conditions. In the plant-based transition, that will mean that, well, there will be no more slaughterhouses, so there will no longer be any degradation or exploitation of people working in those slaughterhouses. Of course, animals are the main beneficiary of our transition, so animals will not suffer in the sense of being packed in giant warehouses and locked up and held prisoner and being maltreated and after everything also killed prematurely. Lastly, the environment also has will have positive consequences from this change to a plant-based diet. So we will be able to reduce the emission of greenhouse gases, also of the emission of nitrogen, of phosphates. And what is really interesting also in this context of landscapes is that we can, well, on a large scale, increase the uptake of CO2 via new nature, via rewilding, through having forests where there used to be grasslands or pastures. And this will have an enormous effect on biodiversity, so the decline will be stopped and the regrowth will start, and the whole landscape will change, which will mean that there will be more nature for people to enjoy. So the question, of course, is, well, it may have many, many benefits, but can it be done? And what do we have to do about it? So there are plenty of things that a government can do to speed up this process and to even put it on the agenda. But at present, in our communication and cognition research group, we look at mostly like interpersonal, face-to-face or campaign style communication. So communication aimed at the consumer, so to say, aimed at our fellow human beings. In our group, we study the cognitive basis of persuasive communication. So how can you convince people to change their mind or their behavior? So both from an interpersonal perspective, but also intrapersonal. So interpersonal is the social elements that are involved in communication, and intrapersonal is about how does a person process this information about, say, his or her ethical system vis-a-vis the social norms that are active at present in his or her social environment. So how does that work? How can we influence behavior and these behavioral determinants like attitudes? So what do you think about something? What are your intentions to do, etc. Now, this communication that we are presently researching is focused on this transition to a plant-based lifestyle. And I think it's really essential to emphasize that communication, well, inherent in communication should be audience segmentation. And what I mean by that is that we should form our message, adapt our message to the part of the audience of the whole population that we're talking to. So this is just to illustrate that you can segment an audience, and this is a very nice illustration by Rogers, some in the 60s of the previous century. He looked at the diffusion of innovation through a society, and what he saw is that there. So he identified a couple of subgroups in the population, and what is interesting is that you need to talk to the innovators and the early adopters in a completely different manner than to the early or late majority. And what we so like the intuition is that innovators and early adopters like me, you, our audience present right now, is in this early group, and most of us will be sensitive to arguments, open to other kinds of arguments, other kinds of thinking, and but the impression that we have is that the early and late majority are much more likely to be moved by the social norm. So that is not that these innovators and early adopters are exempt from social norms, quite on the contrary, but that, so to give an example, if you want to have like strong arguments, ethical arguments, you can direct them to the innovators and early adopters, but if you want to reach the early majority and late majority, so the bulk of our population, you will need to make sure that the social norm is changed, and how that is to be done, that's a very interesting question. So with that, I forget my group. That's that's poor behavior on my side. So this is the group. It's a very new group, a very young group in terms of when it started. So we have Dr. João Graça, whose expertise lies in social psychology, Dr. Yves Onkena, survey methodology and statistics. Emma Zaal is a PhD student. She started 1st of November on social desirability responding. Dr. Wim Fijk, expert on marketing, communication, and corporate social responsibility. And Jeanette Bosma, who will start next week as a student assistant of our group. Okay, so I give the floor to João.
Excellent. Thank you, John, for this interesting kickoff of this your duo talk. So João, you're good to go. I think, John, you might want to stop sharing.
Yes, I'm trying to find how I do that. Yeah, you kick me out? Yes?
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
You've been kicked out.
Yeah.
By somebody.
Good.
Very good.
Thanks for kicking me out.
Yeah. Okay. João, you are also
everyone.
part of the group?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thank you, John, for the introduction, and thank you very much, friends, for sharing this session. So my name is João. I am new in Groningen. I just arrived here in August. I am very pleased to join you here today. So I know we are all a bit tired of doing everything online, but
No, we're not. No, we're not. Depends on the subject.
I'm using this, even if the subject is not extremely interesting for some of you. Well, I can say that I'm using this Blue Jeans platform for the first time, so that adds novelty, at least for me.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
And my background is in social psychology, and I just joined the communication and information science department.
Okay, and where were you before August? Where were your...
I was in Lisbon. Working at the University of Lisbon and doing some teaching at the Catholic University of Portugal.
Okay.
So now I
know
work
that your follow-up, Susanne Täuber, she's also a social psychologist. So
yeah, I noticed, yeah.
the faculty of social psychology is sort of getting empty because people move to economics and they move to communication. They move everywhere. But, very good.
I think we are everywhere.
Yeah.
So now I work at the intersection of psychology and communication with a focus on enabling sustainability transitions.
Okay.
And
very good.
with a particular interest in this focal topic in particular.
Yeah.
Sustainable food consumption.
Okay. Well, take it away. You, I think you want to do want to show us a presentation, and that's good.
So to pick up on where John left the presentation, so you can all see a blank screen now, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now you see some content, I assume.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm going to briefly showcase one of the projects that is ongoing. And this project is focused on developing and testing messages to promote more plant-based eating. This is funded by a US-American research fund, and it basically has two stages or two phases. One in which we developed and pre-tested a set of messages, and that is concluded. And we have another stage where we are doing a randomized control trial to test basically which message content are more effective for whom and why. So these messages are informed and were developed based on two theoretical frameworks, which are the HAPA model, Health Action Process Approach model, which comes from health psychology, or was developed and applied mostly in health psychology. And the other theoretical framework that we are using and that we have used is the self-determination theory, which is basically a theory of motivation. So today we are presenting a very short overview of these two frameworks and an example of these messages that we have developed. And we will also very briefly refer to the RCT, the randomized control trial, that is currently ongoing. So one theory is the HAPA model, Health Action Process Approach model, and put very simply, according to this model, audiences can be segmented into these three groups with regard to a given target behavior, of course. So we have non-intenders, people who are not yet motivated to change, intenders, so people who are motivated to change, they are willing to change, perhaps they even have intention to change, but they are not yet performing the target behavior. And we have actors, so people who have already started to engage in the target behavior. And what this model proposes is that individuals in different stages will require different approaches so that they can change or attain a given behavior. So coming from here to here, from the non-intention or non-willingness towards a more volitional stage, and then transitioning to action initiation and maintenance. And what the model proposes is that we have a set of variables to enhance, or that should enhance, motivation or intention. So moving from non-intender to intender. And then we have another set of variables to enhance capacity. So going from intender to actor. And I can refer to these variables here. So action self-efficacy, outcome expectancies, and risk perception. And then we have coping self-efficacy, action planning, and coping planning. So what does this mean? To enhance motivation, we should, according to this model, of course, target risk perception. So the perceived severity of the current situation and the need for change. We should target outcome expectancies. So building or anticipating positive consequences from change. And action self-efficacy. So the belief that one will be able to perform the desired action. So this was to build or to foster motivation, to foster capacity or volition. We should target action planning. So when, where, and how the behavior will be performed. Coping planning, so anticipating barriers and generating alternatives to overcome these barriers. And coping self-efficacy, which basically refers to an optimistic belief about our ability to deal with any barriers that may arise in the maintenance period. So this was a brief overview of the HAPA stage model, and we, as I mentioned, also used some inputs from the self-determination theory and put very, very simply, of course, according to this theory of behavior, if a theory of motivation, if a given target behavior supports a basic set of psychological needs, it will become progressively more internalized in a person's sense of self. So to enable change, the target behavior should convey a sense of autonomy, a sense of competence, and a sense of relatedness. What does this mean? So autonomy, a sense of choice and volition, as opposed to feeling controlled and coerced into performing the target behavior. Competence refers to a sense of effectiveness, sense of personal effectiveness, and relatedness refers to a sense of acceptance and closeness to others. So based on these two models, and of course based on a review, actually a systematic review of relevant barriers and enablers of this target behavior, transitioning towards more plant-based eating, we developed tailored messages targeting young adults, so people aged from 20 to 35 years old. And we created a matrix, a kind of matrix to develop and to frame message contents based on the HAPA stage model and the self-determination theory. And these two tables here illustrate this process. So we have two different messages, and we have one table for each message. So one message focused on enhancing motivation or targeting motivation variables, which include risk perception, outcome expectancies, and action self-efficacy, here in row. And the contents that we developed were framed based on inputs from the self-determination theory. So we have them here in column. So one message targeting motivation features, risk perception, outcome expectancies, and action self-efficacy, and one message targets capability or capacity features, so action planning, coping planning, and maintenance self-efficacy. We developed these messages and we are testing them in a video format. I wanted to show you at least one of the messages. Let's see how this goes, and let's see if you can hear sound. So I'm going to click here, and it should open a window in my browser, and I hope that you can follow the presentation from there. It's a very short message. It only has around 2.5 minutes. Let's see if we can look at it. Can you see the Firefox tab?
Yes, I can see that,
okay.
But I don't know whether the sound will work, but we'll have to see.
Let's see, but even if the sound doesn't work, it's enough so you,
okay.
so you can get a sense.
You can also share the link in the chat,
okay,
I think.
Yeah.
That could
yeah,
also...
but it's, even if the sound doesn't work, it's not really a problem. It's just to illustrate how we materialized this this table targeting capacity variables. So if we have time, it would be interesting to analyze in more detail how each or the different elements of this matrix were reflected in the video. But again, this is just to give you a general impression of how we can materialize and develop communication products that are informed by theoretical models. And of course, if we had followed a different theoretical model, the message would look very different in terms of content and form. So we developed the messages, and we are currently collecting data to evaluate the impact of this message using a randomized control trial. So again, we are targeting young consumers, and we are aiming to reach a sample of 1,200 participants. And we actually have 3 versions of the messages: Portuguese version, a Dutch version, and an English version. And we are testing this with 3 different samples. Our design is a block randomized control trial. So we have 2 stages. So we have intenders and non-intenders, and then we randomly allocate or assign these participants to one of 4 conditions. So we have motivation video, we have the capacity video, we have a combination condition where it's basically we merged the motivation and the capacity videos, and we have a control condition in which participants are, it's just a no exposure to information condition. And we also have a follow-up in 1 week, so we assess some key variables, both in the first wave where we present them the message, and then in the second wave.
João, I think you're touching your microphone now and then, so it's sort of like a wind blows heavily. So yeah.
Oh, sorry, I think it's should be better now. Okay, thanks for letting me know.
Okay.
And our main dependent variables are a set of attitudinal and self-reported behavioral measures, but of course we are also including some other relevant measures and test them as potential moderators or mediators, which include, for instance, reactance to the messages, which I think it will likely be a concept that should be discussed further ahead in the next presentation. So we certainly want to look into that. We are also currently working on some ideas for the near future, and these include, for instance, establishing an interdisciplinary food living lab here at the University of Groningen, and this would be focused on enabling sustainable food transitions. We have sketched a preliminary action plan with the Green Office, which includes 7 phases or 7 stages. So I will not go into detail about this now, of course, but if you want, we can get back to this. Just so creating the steering group, mapping some main trajectories based on the Food Ambitions document that is being currently developed. So we have some ideas to involve stakeholders and assess needs and basically set baselines for each trajectory. Designing local policies and context-specific interventions based, of course, on the previous stages. Then we could pilot and run some feasibility studies, and then run a full implementation and evaluation of these policies and interventions, and then, of course, finish with a report and dissemination. Just to add some visual interlude here, and to conclude, we are familiar with diverse methodological approaches. These include qualitative, quantitative, and mixed method approaches. We really enjoy and cherish working in multidisciplinary contexts and being engaged in multidisciplinary activities and challenges. So we would really welcome opportunities for collaboration in this topic of sustainable food transitions.
Excellent. Thank you, João. It was a very interesting presentation about ongoing research, and it was very informative and inspiring, I think. Very good. I'd like to turn now to, but we don't have discussion now, we can have it at the end, and we sort of have a discussant, Susanne Täuber, also social psychologist, and Susanne, you're very interested in intergroup dynamics and the moral motivations. We saw quite a lot of in the earlier presentation. So and you also do research on this type of topic. So well, take it away. I think we could have a short talk. Let's see whether you're in already, Susanne.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Frans, and also John and João for the presentations. So indeed, I'm feeling totally at home here because everything's just psychological, social psychological. So I also saw that Jan Willem Ollendijk is here. He's a colleague of mine who also made the switch from the social psychology department to Faculty of Economics and Business, and he's also very interested in the food transition and the moral aspects of it. Yeah. So one of the things I think that matched quite well is that John was looking into the cognitive basis of persuasive communication. I saw that João is already going more into the relational basis. And this is something I'm looking into as well. So really the motivational basis, so not so much the cognitive, how people think about it, but a lot of the stuff I'm looking into is about inadvertent consequences that have not been intended, but that sort of provide a huge challenge for the process of transitioning into behavioral change that is intended. Okay. So I do have a presentation which I'm happy to share with you quickly, and I'm.
Yeah, I think Shanti will put that up. Shanti, yes. You will? Yeah, very good.
Yes.
And just a word of explanation. We're trying to the whole lecture sort of trying to connect us to nature in a way. You could say less suffering for animals and less suffering for humans. But Susanne, she's in the rurals of the northern Netherlands, and it's foggy weather. And when she has foggy weather, her internet connection is also foggy, so it's a very live connection we have. So that's the reason for her video not being very sharp. I could hear you loud and clear though, so that is the good news. And so perhaps it's wise even to shut down your video while you're talking now. Then Shanti can.
I'm happy to do that. Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Shanti can put up the presentation, and then we start with that.
Yeah. So our internet comes from a live site with Cernica, so that's where we're affected Fokker.
Okay.
So the Fokker is just between us and the line of sight. I was trying to snoop away internet from Cernica, but.
Okay.
Sometimes it doesn't work that well.
Yeah. Susanne, it doesn't work on my screen. Can you try it again, or maybe Stephanie can try it? It doesn't work for me as well.
I'll try. It's telling me again that I'm sharing my screen, but I'm not seeing anything. Are you?
Okay, Stephanie, can you try? I'll send it to you as well.
1 second.
But it's also not such a big of a deal. I can send around the presentation afterwards.
Yeah.
For your interest, and I can just also talk you through it a bit.
Very good.
So one of the things that we often see with behavior change initiatives, such as the one of transition to a plant-based diet, is that politicians, policymakers, and also scientists often use moral arguments, right? Because there is this idea that moral arguments sort of underline the urgency of the transition. Right? John, you showed us how urgently we actually need a change, and then there it is. Oh, thanks. So, yes, I can see it.
We can see it. Very good. Very good.
So you can already move to the next. Is that Shanti or Stephanie?
Stephanie.
Stephanie. Okay. We think to know that using moral arguments sort of adds this extra motivational layer that pushes people over the edge, right? For instance, if you have these people that you were also referring to are on the brink, they have not yet adopted the behavior, but are considering it, right? And I often think that if we stress the moral aspects, so for instance, the suffering of animals or the destruction of the planet, or the suffering of people working in these slaughterhouses, that this convinces people. And the reason why we care so much about morality, Stephanie, you can go on, is that when we conform to the moral norms of the groups that we belong to, we are respected members of those groups. And on the downside, this also means that if we fail to live up to these norms, we risk of becoming excluded. And in evolutionary terms, this basically means we will not have reproductive success and we will not survive. So people are very, very sensitive to the threat or the potential threat of being kicked out of their groups because they are being seen as immoral. But then, thanks, Stephanie. But then one of the problems we have is that everything can be moralized, right? Because what is moral is not really something that is shared globally, but it's very much dependent on framing, political agenda setting, different groups. So you can live one group that finds a certain behavior totally moral, while your neighboring group finds the exact same behavior an expression of superior morality. So this is possible. This means that morality is a bit, it can be a contested topic. But once we have decided that something is moral, it becomes binding for the group. And this is also what John referred to in terms of social norm. And when we have reached that stage, then our social image and respect from other group members are depending on us conforming to that moral norm. So if we go on, then we know that over time, Stephanie, thanks. Over time, the issues that are seen as moral can change. And one of the best things to illustrate that is probably cigarette smoking and also meat eating. So Rosine already years ago described this process in which a certain behavior that was previously morally neutral becomes more and more moralized. And he called that process moralization. But of course, you can imagine that the process can also go in the reverse direction, right? So, for instance, previously getting a divorce or being homosexual was very much a moral issue. It's not so much anymore nowadays, at least in certain groups, it's not. So you can see that whether something is moral or not is a point of debate. But once we have decided that something is moral, it's important for us as group members to stick to that norm. And this is also why motivation is so important in that topic. Can we go to the next slide? So one of the things, and that's probably interesting, especially from a communication perspective. So how, when we frame things, how we make a topic moral. We know from research, if we suggest that a behavior is under people's self-control, if the behavior is inflicting harm on others, and if the behavior is associated with stigmatized groups, then the chances of the behavior getting moralized are much higher than if if these traits don't apply to the behavior. And that's logical. So imagine a behavior that you have not under your control. Of course, nobody can call you out on your morality if you don't show the behavior, because you literally can't do anything about it. But because of these traits of behavior, I became very interested in what the transition to the participation society would do to social cohesion. That's on the next slide, because I saw that let's say, the communication around this transition to the participation society very much underlined exactly these points. Control, so citizens should take responsibility for living healthily, meaning they can, so it's under their control. If they don't live healthily, that will harm society because they incur costs. It's a zero-sum game. So the costs we spend on, let's say, obese people, we cannot spend on schools or education. So in this kind of setting, I thought, let's have a look at what happens to people or the dynamics that unfold between people who are living healthily, so who actually fulfill new social norm, and those who don't. We can skip the next slide. This is just to showcase the kind of association you also get in pictures with these behaviors. But so where you often see fat people or people, for instance, in America voting on Trump, it's more moralized behavior, but in pictures is associated even subconsciously with stigmatized groups, for instance. So I was looking I was collecting a lot of data in that. This was a project funded by the Dutch Hoeks Society, WO. And I was looking into health moralization. So in how far, and here I was looking at people who were conforming to this norm, right? So in your case, for instance, people who are already eating mostly plant-based diets, right? And I was looking into how far did they moralize health, and how far did they think that being healthy, living healthily, not smoking, being normal weight, healthy weight is a moral issue, and then in how far did they stigmatize those who were not fulfilling this norm, and what did that do to social cohesion? So across these 4 studies, as you can see on the next slide, what you see is there is an undermining effect from health moralization on social cohesion. So you get quite clear group processes, intergroup processes, where people start to dislike each other quite a bit and do not want to spend time with each other so much. And this effect is brought about, unfolds because of stigmatization. So because of the way in which people start to look at each other. And then, of course, there's another side to this medal, and these are, so what you see here is that the impact on those people who you could consider more good. Yeah, Willem, are you saying something?
Oh, sorry, I still have my mic on, excuse me.
Yeah.
Okay. So what you see, the impact on the morally good is, so to speak, that their moral superiority serves as a legitimation to exclude and look down on the other side. And then you could say, okay, but maybe we could take this, we could accept this, if only our messages are motivating for the other group, right? Those who we want to convince and persuade. So the question is, do we find the desired impact on behavior change or intention to behavioral change on those we are now considering morally bad people? And what we find, and I've been doing this research now for 8 years in total, and we find that consistently again and again and again. This is the next slide, Stephanie, is that the morally bad, right, in these kinds of situations engage in defensive inaction. So actually what they want in a motivational sense, what they want is to prove the other wrong. They will not change their behavior, because changing their behavior would mean to agree with the other's perception that they are morally inferior. And so as we saw before, being a moral person is very important for us as a group living species. So people are very reluctant to agree with this, even if it's just a subtle insinuation. So we are actually by now thinking that this defensive inaction is a quite functional approach to managing extremely adverse threats to moral and social image. So it makes sense to show this. Next slide, what we see, so what we find over and over again is that moralization is causally related to defensiveness. Defensiveness is typically expressed through inaction, where inaction means to not conform with the social norm in question. And we have also shown repeatedly now that inaction has communicative purposes, so it's strategically tailored to the different audiences. So the segmentation in audiences that your group is using, John and João, is something that we also find, really depending on the group you're talking to, you will find different reactions and different behavioral intentions. And what I liked about the research you were showing us, so the lessons we learned, so if we go over now to the lessons learned from this kind of research program, is use morally neutral language, make it about competence, skills, and information, and be non-judgmental. And if I look at the clip that you showed, João, I really love it, because this is exactly what you need. It's this kind of we are in this together, we can fail. This is about, learning new stuff. Sticking to it is really, really nice. And it totally matches the kind of things that we found out in the health context. So I have really, really high hopes for your for your research to result in these desired behavioral changes, and maybe to switch to the next, and I'll also leave it at that slide. So what we have learned as challenges is that moralization primarily motivates the believers. So the people that you call adopters, early adopters, is like preaching to the choir. You're basically convincing people who are already convinced. And one of the problems, and this is something that Jan Willem, for instance, also looks into, is that moralization can occur inadvertently and cause do-gooder derogation. So while you have very good intentions to convince people, these people can start to really feel that you are a bad person because you're making them feel bad. Huh? So what you see in a societal setting is that if you don't craft messages carefully and prepare the behavioral transition carefully, you could actually end up prompting a negative self-reinforcing cycle of psychological defensiveness and moral condemnation. And on that happy note, I will finish here. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Susanne. That was a nice getting together with the social psychologists here.